guys, this is Kim Campbell, and you are listening to the Can't Not Share podcast. Today, I'm very excited to introduce a good personal friend of mine. His name is Brian Fleming, and it's very hard for me to call him Brian because I've known him for 28 years now, and I would say that 99% of the time, I refer to him as Flem. That's how we knew him back at San Diego State in college where we met him. That was kind of his nickname, but we'll be professional today and we'll call him Brian. Brian is one of my husband's best friends. They met in college at San Diego State. They were in the same fraternity. In fact, they met actually in high school where they attended Modern Day and met back there and then ended up going to the same college. And back when I met Brian, we were kind of a little bit wilder, a little bit more fun, staying out late, that kind of stuff. But I always knew in college that Brian was a believer. I was always very impressed by his commitment to go to church on Sundays, go to Mass on Sundays, even through college. And as we settled down and got married and started raising our families, I know that his faith became more and more of an important thing in his life. And he lives in Carlsbad, California, with his wife, Nicole. They've got 3 beautiful kids, 2 in college and 1 still in high school. He was a business owner for many years and recently decided to go back to school and get his master's in theology, which I found incredibly inspiring, and is now teaching classes at his Catholic church and just really digging in. And so I decided to invite him on today just to kind of have a chat with him and hear a little bit about what's on his heart, where God is taking him, what God is teaching him. And so, Brian, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's a little mind-blowing that we're doing this, but it's super cool, so thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm excited to have you. I want you to kind of start out by telling me, and it's fun because we've never even had this conversation, I guess, in this way, but tell me a little bit about what caused you to go get your master's in theology while you were a very, very busy business owner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in short, I was born and raised as, they say, cradle Catholic, from the right out of the womb. And we had a very devout family. We went to church every single Sunday. My mom was one of those little old ladies in the back of church saying the rosary almost every single day. And so went to San Diego State, as you said, had a great time. And would still go to church. Like, God was still a part of my life, although I was not walking the way that He would want me to. And so, I got married, had kids, and I can't really pinpoint any particular time, but there was different moments in my life where I kind of felt like God was really calling me, and He was saying, either follow me or you're not. And something somewhere along the way really captivated my interest, and it was Scripture, and it was the Bible, and it was just snowballed, and this became just something that became bigger and bigger in my life, and so I spent and I still do spend so much of my free time that I have thinking about theological things and the Bible and where God's calling me and what is happening. And so these are all just big picture ideas that I keep on putting this puzzle together in my head, and I'm doing this all as I kind of grow closer to God. So there's a bunch of little stories within there, but ultimately I did decide that, man, I'm learning so much, and I was helping out at my church with what they call the RCIA program. It's those that are converting to Catholicism, and then I thought, you know what, I'm going to look into getting my master's. It was during COVID, and things had slowed down so much, and I had a fair amount of additional time on my hands, and so I started then doing it online, and it was through a phenomenal institution called the Augustine Institute out of Denver. But I had read so many of the professors' books, and so it was really an incredible thing, and I'm so glad that I did it. And so it was very edifying.
What do you feel like? You said God started to kind of work on you and saying like, follow me or not. Like, what does that mean to you? And where do you think at that time he was asking you to follow him to, or and what about now? Has it changed, or do you feel like it's still the same?
I think my calling is to help educate others and to share, and so I'm doing so much of that, so much more of that today, and so it was really, and I'll tell you this very brief story, but I happened to read this book. It was very influential. It was the start of something, and then for some reason I was just on an iPad. I think iPads had first come out. This was, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that, and I saw this near-death experience, or someone claiming to have a near-death experience, and I doubted it. I said, I don't think so. I think this is totally BS. But I thought this is kind of interesting, though, and I believed that sort of thing could happen. And then I just happened to go on to the next thing, and I saw there was this guy that had this near-death experience. His name was Mickey Robinson. And this guy, God was saying, what about this one? And I listened to this guy's story, which is about 6 minutes long, and I watched it probably 20 times after that. I'm like, this happened. This happened to this guy, and he was in a plane crash, and his body was burned. His face was badly burned. His arm was like just almost like his fingers were gone, and he had scars all over his body. But he's telling this story, and even when I read through the comments, people were saying there is no lie in this man. Like, he is telling the truth, and I believed it too. And I literally got up and I walked around my house, and I was like, oh my gosh, like everything became so real for me. And I was like, I don't know what's going to happen when I die. And honestly, like, sometimes I follow God, but a lot of times I'm not. And I was walking around my house and I said, I need to make a decision right now, which way I'm going to go. And I just said, you know what? I'm following God. Like, I've got to. This is now my life. And it was a very decisive moment, and I literally paced like almost in a panic for a little bit. And so it was and I've had other experiences like this. Like after this event, I would say. People give you a book, or you start to really think about something, and you're like, oh my gosh, I think so. God gives you these moments, I think, and they're profound and they're life changing. So that was a big part of me, like, pushing me along, I guess. God's holding my hand, and sometimes as a child, I'm squeezing my way out, and He's like saying, no, come on, hold on tight. And so, that was a big part. That was a big thing in my life.
And where do you feel like this whole part of, you said, like, you feel like your calling is to educate and share. That's a pretty, like, clear. Have you thought a lot about, like, what your calling is, or, like, specifically what God has called you to, or is that just kind of something that just comes to mind when you think about God? Or has God told you, like, I want you to educate and share?
So I've done a few different things, and like I said, I was helping out with the RCA program, and I just felt like I was making an impact. And even today, as I give these talks at my own church, and I'm doing it like it's maybe like once or twice a month, I feel like I'm making an impact. And so I just felt like I wanted to learn all these things, and I had a thirst for it, and I kept pursuing it. And then I just kind of thought, well, what's the end game for this? Unless I share it with somebody else, it really was just for me, and it couldn't just be that. And so I love it, and not only do I think I'm supposed to do this, but I enjoy it. When I can turn on light bulbs for other people and they think, oh my gosh, I get it, and it makes it more real for them, then I feel like I'm helping, I'm being a coworker with God. I'm evangelizing with Him, and as a good disciple. So I just feel like that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you feel when you're doing it? So do you feel like when you're like, let's say, and I went a month or so ago and watched you teach at church, which was amazing. It was awesome. I feel like you're a very gifted teacher. When you're doing that, you're in the midst of it and you're up in front of, students or whatever, people, do you have a feeling that's like, oh my gosh, I'm made to do this? Like, do you feel like that when you're doing it or no? Or like, I just love this so much, like I could do this all the time.
I'm a fairly comfortable speaker, but I also get nervous before it, and but I almost feel like I have to do this. That's what I feel like more than anything else. Like the first time I did it, I'm like, I don't know how many people are going to be there. Like at first, the person who kind of had me introduce me to do this, the director of this education at our parish, she was like, I think there's probably going to be like 15 people there, but we just need somebody to teach the adults. Yeah. And I said, okay, that sounds great. And then about a week before, she's like, man, we have like 80 people. And I'm like, 80? Gosh. I'm like, oh my gosh. Wow. So I thought, wow, okay. And so I get there early. I'm setting everything up. I'm, taking deep breaths and just relax. And I think to myself, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, there's no turning back.
Right.
And it's like that moment I had when I watched Mickey Robinson. I said, which way are you going?
Yeah.
And I have to go this way. So it's but once I start going, I kind of feel like, okay, I'm at home at doing this.
Yeah. Like you're made for this, like in a way, like. So I just feel like God creates, obviously we know he creates everybody so uniquely with different gifts and different talents and different like unique abilities. And I think it's such an amazing thing when you can have that feeling of like, oh wait, I think this is the thing he made me for. Yeah. Like this is what I'm good at. And I love doing it, like this just feels like a sweet spot. I know we talked a little bit about like the when you're preparing to teach, the preparation and what you are learning as you prepare. What have been some of the highlights or some of the favorite things that you've kind of dug into to teach that are really like topics that you really are interested in or you love to talk about?
It's the funny thing is so I don't like create the topics of conversation for the things I'm doing now, and these are about 50-minute like sessions or 50 minutes or to an hour. So I don't pick them, but the interesting thing is that and sometimes I thought, oh my gosh, it's not my thing really, this particular topic, but so I have to do my own research and stuff, but I can build off of what I've already known and what I've already learned. And so it almost has all become very interesting to me, and so it's things that I thought, well, this isn't going to be as fascinating as the last one. I kind of start digging into it. I'm like, this is incredibly fascinating, And so it's, I would say that I don't know if I have like a favorite or anything, but as we talked about, what I'm oftentimes doing is, so when I started with my master's course, the very first course, there's a few mandatory ones, and the very first one was salvation history. And it's just the big picture of God's revelation to us and like what we're getting from that. And so, and the way that the curriculum worked in that school was it just kind of built off that. So it was kind of it must have been like a 10 or 12 week course, but you basically was a walk through the entire Bible. It's like starting Genesis 1 to the end of Revelation. And so, but what you could see is that there was a structure to the whole thing. Yeah. And that the structure and the main story illuminated all the little stories in there. And you could see that there was a common thread being throughout the entire story. And it just disclosed so much more truth. And I heard somebody say recently in a podcast actually that I was listening to, and the guy said, you need to major in the main thing before you major in the little things. And I just think that was so true. And so when I normally give my presentations, I oftentimes am repeating myself at the first part of it, but I'm giving them the big story, and then I'm saying, okay, let's just take a step back, look at the big picture. And then when we do that, we can go a million different directions from that. But we're still in the big picture. We're still, grasping this general truth that I think everybody recognizes. So yeah.
What is can you summarize that? Like today, like what is the big picture? What is
Yeah, so I would say this, like if, so I would say this, that if you just take a look at the Bible, and if you are in any of these classes, you're like, here, Brian is going to say this again, and when we go a different way. But if we just look at the Bible, it is a book of an old covenant, or the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yeah.
And the word testament is synonymous with the word covenant. So we could say that the Bible is an old covenant and a new covenant. And so if we look at salvation history, it is God, reaching into humanity and saving us through really ever-expanding covenants. So God makes a covenant with Adam, and it's not as apparent as people would say, like the covenant is with Moses. But if you do study covenants, you'd say, okay, he made a covenant with Adam, and it's inclusive of Adam and his wife Eve. Then God made a covenant with Abraham. It's inclusive of Noah, and then it's inclusive of Noah and his household, Abraham and his tribe, Moses and 12 tribes, David and a kingdom, and then finally God makes a covenant that's inclusive of, through Jesus, of all people and all nations. So God is ever expanding this covenant that he's making. And if you look at it, if you look at this, you can look at the roles of these different people. Adam's a husband. Noah's a chieftain. Noah is a head of household. Abraham is a chieftain. Moses is a judge. David's a king. And you're like, well, who's Jesus? And Jesus is all of those things. He's the bridegroom. We're the bride. So he's a husband. He's a head of the household. He's the head of the church, of his body. It's a church. Abraham is a chieftain. Jesus is described as a chief cornerstone. Jesus is a judge, just as Moses is. Jesus is a king, just as David is. And so, but the thing about these guys is that they all failed to be faithful to the covenant. So he's like recapitulating what it means to be a husband, to be a head of household, right? To be a head of the church, to be a chieftain, a judge, a king. He's showing this is how one is faithful to God in these different roles. So it's like he recapitulates or resummarizes what this actually means to have been in that covenant, in a new covenant. And
wow.
So and I know it's kind of a lot, but
I've never thought of it that way. I've never heard of it that way. And what I love is like when you're talking about that stuff, like my heart is like pounding and I feel like I want to cry because it's like when you just hear truth, it's just like that is so amazing.
It's incredible. I know.
I love that.
And there's so many like big picture like ideas that that I build off that. Like, so I'm making this presentation this week, and essentially I go back to these things, and I'm saying, can we see what God is doing? And it's incredible. It's just so fascinating for me.
What are you teaching on this week?
So this week, it's the year of the Jubilee, and so and it's beginning of Holy Week.
Right.
So I'm actually going to talk about two different things, but they overlap in a sense, and so basically I'll be talking about the Jubilee, and we'll talk about Genesis and what exactly is happening in the Jubilee, and so it's like we're returning to Eden in a sense, and again it's. So we'll be talking about the Jubilee.
Will you tell me, like in a short, quick 101 version, like what is Jubilee?
So everybody knows the story. Moses returns to Egypt, guides the Israelites through the Red Sea. They get to the other side, and they create a new nation, and they enter into a covenant with God. And part of that is that God gives them a law regarding the year of Jubilee. So it's supposed to happen every 50 years. And basically what he says is this. He says that in the year of Jubilee, you're going to rest from work. So you can't go out to the fields and harvest the crops or anything. You need to trust God that this will happen. And you also need to, anybody who is a slave needs to be set free, and everybody gets their land back, and all debts are forgiven. And so this is basically what it is. And gosh, I want to say so much, I don't know where to go. But this is really, in a sense, it's looking forward to our home with God, because really what happened in Eden is that we lost many of these different things, right? So like when Adam and Eve ate the apple, it said, "Cursed is the ground that you walk on," and you'll have to toil for your food to eat. And what God is saying in the Jubilee is, you know what? On this year, don't work. God will provide you with the food. Saying on this year, it will be like Eden, and you are a slave to sin, right? You were just a slave in Egypt. You're a slave to sin now, but we're releasing the slaves. So just like I released you from Egyptian servitude and the King Pharaoh, you are going to do that too, and you're going to do it with each other, right? So you need to act like with mercy, just as God's telling them, I need you to return to Eden and act like God acts. Be forgiving, set people free, and be with me. Be in the land with me. Rest. This is a year of rest. And so that's kind of like a Cliff Notes version of this. But
how does that apply? So if this is the year of Jubilee, right? Which is amazing, because Mark and my husband and I are going to Rome in a few weeks, and it's like the year of the Jubilee. It's like whatever, it's super exciting. But what does that mean for people today? Like, how do we observe that?
Well, I would say the biggest thing is it is a year of mercy. So we need to, as God has treated us, forgive us our trespasses, we forgive those who trespass against us. We should be forgiving. If God is forgiving us, then this should be a forgiving time for us. And so you are actually doing something that all Catholics are called to, and that's a pilgrimage. And it's a pilgrimage to Rome in this case. And so Catholics are called, it's going to be a busy time there to that, but you can make a pilgrimage to anywhere. But it's like you're returning home. Okay. And so if you were a slave if you were a slave in Israel and you were living under these laws, and you might, it's not totally a slave like we might think of it today. Somebody may have come across difficult financial times, and so they literally worked for somebody and they would call them a slave, but really they're just paying this thing back. But it was a return home. So if you were released from all your debts, then you were able to return to your place. And if you had to give up your land, you got your land back. So part of this is you're merciful, right? Today, like how does it apply to our life today? And you're supposed to return home. And so that returning home, like you could go to Rome, right? Or you could just do a pilgrimage to like another cathedral or something like that. But it is like you're going back to your home, right? You're being released from captivity, and now it's time to return home. Yeah. Is basically what it is. So,
and is that like symbolic of like returning to the Lord, like returning back to God?
So what's interesting, yes. And so basically, like you're going to where God is, and just maybe taking us a little. So when Moses gets to the other side, and they're at Mount Sinai, and he kind of, in a sense, presides over the establishment of a new covenant with the people and God. And so he reads to them the law, and it's like a wedding, because a covenant is like an exchange of people. Like he says, I will be your God, you will be my people. We'll kind of we'll possess each other. And so it's the closest thing that we have to this is like a marriage. And that's what's happening at Sinai. So what's interesting is that Moses says to the people, okay, here are all the laws. The people say, we will do everything that the Lord has commanded. He sprinkles blood on them. And then God calls them up to back up the mountain. And in ancient Judaism, when a man and a woman were married initially, they go through this ceremony, and then the man would leave and go find a place that he could take his wife in. So he leaves to go do that. And so what happens on Sinai is they have this thing. They almost like say their vows. We will do everything the Lord has commanded. And then God calls Moses up the mountain, and then he tells Moses, this is what you're going to make. And it's the tabernacle. So it's like this portable temple that they will have there. What that is a place where God can dwell with his people. It's the place where God is going to take his people to Miriam. So at the end, when we see Jesus saying the same thing in John 14, where he says he needs to go away, and I'm going to prepare a place for you. So he's establishing a covenant. This is John's. He really doesn't have it's a little bit different, the Last Supper scenario than the Synoptic Gospels, but in John's, it's in John 13 and 14, and Jesus tells him the same thing. He's establishing a covenant, and he says, I'm going to go prepare a place for you. So this is the ultimate place where we get our land back, right? Where we're going to have a place to be with God. And so when we make that pilgrimage, it's like we're returning home, essentially.
That's so amazing.
I know. It's the Cliff Notes version of it for sure, and I jumped around quite a bit, but I mean, ordained by God, the year of Jubilee, and it takes a lot of twists and turns in Israel's story, and it makes and when you see those twists and turns, you can see why God acted the way that he did. There's a lot of scholars that believe that really the Israelites only practiced 1 or 2 Jubilees, and that when their temple is destroyed and they go into exile, it's for 70 years. It's for 70 years. And it's for each year that they did not practice the Jubilee. So so I don't know. It's that there's a lot of scholars who believe that, so it's a central part. It's a part of the big picture. And when Jesus enters the synagogue and he reads the scroll from Isaiah, he's announcing the Jubilee. Like, this is the Lord's year of the Lord's favor, is another way to say year of the Jubilee. Okay. And all the people are amazed by this thing. So that is what's being established. That's a big part of the story. Yeah.
I don't know how we got here, but this is incredible. I'm like sitting here looking at you, and I'm like, how in heaven's name did you get so smart? This is crazy.
I don't know. I appreciate you saying that. And, what I'm sharing is not like something I came up with. In fact, whenever I'm like teaching a group, I'm so meticulous about making sure that I got this right, that I'm not like guiding somebody off,
astray,
and giving them the wrong story.
Right.
And so it's something that Christians have understood since the first century, because we can go back and read like church fathers stuff, and I'm not saying anything different than they are.
Yeah.
But
your understanding and recall and stuff it's incredible.
Well, thank you.
To witness and learn from. Like, I've read the Bible many, many, many times, but I could never have just taught the way that you did. Like, I just want to like reaffirm like the calling of being a teacher, and I love that you felt like God told you to educate and share, because that is what you're doing. Like, you're obedient, and I feel like God has gifted you with this, and it's clearly like just a gift of yours for sure. Yeah. It's amazing.
Well, honestly, I feel like, I know the name of your podcast is Cannot Share.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. I'm like, you know what? Like, if I've learned these things, and I almost feel like everybody should know them, and because it tells you about you being a human being. Yeah. And where does this all go for me? So it just makes sense of life.
It does. Yeah. Absolutely. I know. But it's so fun because we could both feel the same way about like, we should be sharing this. We should be educated. We should be sharing. This is what we should be using our lives to do. But it's so fun to see how God creates people so differently, because like I'm not a teacher. Like, I can't teach the way you just taught, like just that education and the knowledge that, I'm more of like an encourager, right? Like, I feel like God has called me to encourage people and share my stories and share what God's done with me. So I'm more of like a storyteller about more personal things that God has taught me. But I love that we can be talking about the same God who's called us to similar things, but it's just so different with you, because that is just the nitty gritty goodness of the Word of God. It's so powerful. I just love that you know it so well.
Yeah, I mean, and I appreciate that's super nice, all those things you just said about me. But I for the most part, I feel like I'm just moved to do this thing, and it is funny, like our, we're, it kind of blows me away sometimes that I just think that, and I was actually talking to this group of 6th and 7th and 8th graders at the school that my kids went to, called St. John's in Encinitas, and I was so they asked me to come in there and just give like a half an hour little talk to the kids before school starts, and so we were doing this, and I was telling them, and I said, that Jesus was 100% God, but he's also 100% a human being. Mm-hmm. He possesses both of these different things, these different natures. And I said, so you have to think of him as being just like your friend you're sitting next to, that you could talk to him the exact same way, because he was a little boy too one time, and he was a young man. And I'm like, and when I think about, all the different Christians out there, and, I'm sitting in my car saying a quick prayer before we come in here, and you may be saying a prayer, and we're talking to the same guy. Mm-hmm. He is a real human being that can hear us and understand us and grant us our petitions and hear us. And it blows me away that there's so many people out there, and we're all talking to the same person that saved us. So I'm happy to share all this stuff, and I'm super happy we were able to do this.
I know it's fun to connect with you in this way.
Yeah,
I'm so grateful to God for just bringing our families together, and for being able to walk into this new season of our lives, right? And just having this be the central point, even now, to our relationships, being able to just talk about God and share what we're learning and encourage each other in the faith. It's really awesome.
Yeah. No, for sure. I am too. Thrilled to death. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, thank you for making the trek up to San Juan to be with me today in this fun podcast studio. And I think we need to have you back. I need to have you back.
I would love to.
And we have to talk about more and more things. Fun. I love it. I see a future for us doing this together. This is awesome. Well, I pray that this podcast has blessed you and encouraged you today. God is so good, and his plans for you are good. Until next time, may the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you.
This episode has been a production of the Capistrano Valley Christian Schools Podcast Network. Capistrano Valley Christian Schools is a Christian JK-12 school in San Juan Capistrano, California. Be sure to check out, subscribe to, and leave a review of this show and the other shows on our network on your podcast player of choice. Doing so supports the school community in a multitude of ways. For more information about the CVCS Podcast Network or any of our other shows, check out cvcs.org or email podcasts@cvcs.org. On behalf of the whole network, this is Mr. Jasper saying thank you again for listening, and stay tuned for more.